Good morning and welcome to the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce Business Breakfast Series. My name is Kimberly Nadeau-Lindloff. I'm the President and CEO of the Mid-Maine Chamber, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank our 2022 Business Breakfast Series sponsors. They include AT&T, Cross Insurance, New Dimensions Federal Credit Union with their table over here, all duded out in their teal. Nicholson, Michu, and Nadeau, CPAs, O'Donnell, Lee, McCowan, and Phillips, attorneys at law, Sheridan Corporation. Our print media sponsor is the Morning Sentinel, and our radio sponsor is the Mix 107.9. We also want to thank our video sponsor, Kennebec Savings Bank, which allows us to tape and rebroadcast this on local cable, as well as put it up on YouTube so future people can watch this if they want to, and as I mentioned, it's being live streamed as we speak. A reminder to please turn off your cell phones in consideration of the speaker and our audience. And there are evaluation forms on your table, so I would ask that you complete those so that we can get that information back to our speaker to help her focus on what's working and what isn't, and do really great presentations. I want to thank our newest chamber members for the month of November. They include Haskell Digital Services, the Neighborhood Child Care, yay, North Country Car Wash and Laundromat, Kennebec Valley Cordsman, and the Nexus Arcade and Gaming Lounge. We hope that you were able to meet today's business spotlighters. We had Fame with its next, Fame Finance Authority of Maine with its Next Gen program out back, and Pine Tree Society, which does the Pine Tree Camps in Rome. Please feel free after the breakfast to go back, chat with them if you didn't get a chance beforehand. And obviously we want to thank Jake Warren, our Sled Trek's Entrepreneurial Spotlighter today. Again, help yourself to his stuff, and thank you to the Growth Council and the Harold Alfond Institute for Business Innovation. Couple of chamber upcoming events. Waterville Creates has a ribbon cutting that we're doing on Saturday, December 17th at noon at the Shump Art Center at 93 Main Street in downtown Waterville to celebrate its grand opening and great addition to downtown. That building will be open 24/7, 365 days a year, so it's going to be a nice beacon right in the heart of downtown, all lit up. Business after hours for the month of December is on Wednesday, December 14th from 5:30 to 7 at Days Jewelers, again in downtown Waterville, across from the Shump Art Center. The next business breakfast will be January 12th here in this room from 7:15 to 9. Please join us for an engaging panel presentation featuring Ella Bowman, Oakland Town Manager, who's here with us today, Stephanie Trice-Gill, Diversity Recruiter for Intwork, LLC, and Dr. Richard Biffle, Thomas College Professor of Education. They'll present on diversity, equity, and inclusion, understanding and addressing racism and bias in the workplace. You can register at the Chamber's website, midmainechamber.com. And you can register for any of our events there. Our presentation today is Senior VP of Business Operations, TRC Companies, Inc., Ellen Miller, covering minimizing unconscious bias in decision making. Time for Q&A will be allotted at the conclusion of the presentation, and we'll be going around with the microphone so that we can capture that for the live audience and for future rebroadcast. Michelle Jolalabi, who is becoming board chair and chief human resource officer at Thomas College, is going to introduce today's speaker for us. Please join me in welcoming Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome Ellen Miller, pioneer, trailblazer, coach. As the first woman to hold her role in an international corporation, Ellen Miller understands the challenges and rewards of being a pioneer and a leader. Her coaching expertise is enhanced by her real-world experience in business operation, change management, capital planning, and finance. Ellen is aware that many women leaders, pioneers, and change agents are leaving their leadership roles due to lack of fulfillment and satisfaction and desire to have a greater impact. That was the driving force behind her creating Empowers. In 2019, Ellen became a certified professional coach And since then, she has made it her life's goal to help women make an impact and create their legacy. Please join me in welcoming Ellen.
Well, thank you very much. Ooh, yeah, I'm not used to having a mic on. I'm so thrilled to be here, and especially because I think it's so important that we support local business in Maine, and that we take the time to figure out how can we make all businesses successful. Small businesses in Maine make up a huge part of our labor force, employing a lot of people within our communities, and I want to thank you for having me here and also really respect the work that you're doing. I had a really interesting experience recently when I was able to go to a community holiday bazaar in a community in Maine this past weekend, and I went in and there's all these artisans selling their wares in this shop, and I went over to a table and there's two people, and one person is selling beautiful jewelry and the other person is selling pottery. And I'm looking at what they're creating on their own, and the necklaces really caught my attention. And so I'm looking at them, they're very appealing, and one necklace though has a medallion on it that says, "Live your dreams." And that really spoke to me, live your dreams. But there was another medallion that spoke to me that said, "Never give up." And so I'm standing there looking at these necklaces, and I'm pondering inside my head, like, okay, like what really speaks to me more? Live my dreams, never give up. Live my dreams, never give up. So, right, yeah, well. And so, of course, the people were right there, the artisans right there, and I said, okay, I'm a real talker to people. I love meeting people, and so I said, listen, I'm looking at these necklaces. Tell me what you think. What's more important? Live your dreams, never give up. And one of them says, live your dreams. There's just no question. You just have to live your dreams. And the other one says, well, listen, I've always been taught, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. And if you really can't do it, then go ask for help, but never give up. And so I said, okay, that's really, really great conversation. And then I finally picked one of the necklaces, and I went on to go purchase that necklace. So you just listen to me tell a story. Is there anyone here willing to participate in the next question I'm going to ask this group? Anyone willing to? Yep, great, okay. So I want you to tell me, as I was telling you that story about these two artisans, were they men, women, men and a woman? What do you think?
I think I pictured a man, but I don't think you said anything outlining that. No.
Yeah. Anyone have a different opinion? Anyone else? Yes.
They were both women.
You were both women. You had a man. Anybody else? Both women. Both women. Okay. How old were? Oh, yes. Yeah. So we all had different perceptions as I told that story. How old were they? Anyone want to tell me what age range? You don't have to say a specific age range. 30s. 50s. Yeah, so I was talking to these artisans. They were 10 years old. One was a young man, 10 years old, telling me, live your dreams. And the other one was a young woman, 10 years old, telling me, never give up, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. The best part of my story comes here. So I'm there, I'm going to buy this necklace, and I did buy a piece of pottery, mind you, because I'm trying to support these young entrepreneurs. So I just couldn't walk away and leave one out, right? So I'm there, and I'm like, okay, so how much is it? And they're telling me how much it is, and I know the adults are over there with their smart, you guys probably know this more than I do, the smart square, right? So I'm taking them, walking away, they go, where are you going? And I'm like, where am I going? Well, I'm going to go pay. Oh, no, you pay here. I said, you want me to pay cash? Yeah, I'm like, cash is king, right? Cash is king. So I'm like, they already have that mindset, right, of real entrepreneurs, and it was a great experience. But my point here is like we all have our perception, especially as we take in information, and that's why we're talking about unconscious bias today. So you don't need to hear any more about me, but I did, yes.
What necklace did you buy?
Oh, so, after more conversation, yeah, so I bought the necklace that Live Your Dreams. live your dreams. I think we all, strive to have purpose in our lives and fulfill our dreams, for sure. Yeah, so here's another one. I wasn't born in Maine. So we'll talk a little bit about in-group bias, but I wasn't born in Maine, but I grew up in Maine. I moved here when I was 5 years old. I went to UMO, and I went to Thomas College to get my MBA. It was a great experience, so I know there's people here from Thomas. Wonderful college, really liked it and got a lot out of it. And then, I'm a coach, certified professional coach. I am also full-time employee of TRC. Today we're going to talk a little bit about theory. We're going to talk about Daniel Kahneman's theory of System 1 and 2 thinking. I'm going to cover with you 8 types of unconscious bias. There are more, but we're only going to talk about 8 today. And then I'm going to talk to you about little tips, some tips and tools that you can use to raise your awareness and try to make better decisions as you go about your business decisions, community decisions in the community, even in your personal life, things that you can do. So Kelly McGonigal is a Stanford University professor. And she said, if there's a secret to greater self-control, the science points to one thing: the power of paying attention. It's training the mind to recognize when you're making a choice or when you're running on autopilot. And my philosophy is, if you adopt a leader's mindset, our job then is, with a leader's mindset, is to continue to grow. Always strive to learn more. Even if it's just one thing you take away from today, you're growing in some way. So what do you see? Anyone want to say, what did they see when they first saw this? The cat, right? You'll notice that what you see, A in cat, looks exactly like A in Tay. But when I first saw this, I saw the cat as well. Again, your brain, and we're going to talk about this, is trying to take cognitive shortcuts. It's trying to make sense of things very quickly, so it minimizes energy. And one of the ways that happens is creating unconscious biases. We don't know about it. They're based on our life experiences, information that we take in every day, and the way our brain tries to process information the most efficiently and save energy. So Daniel Kahneman, he wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and he came up with this theory that there's 2 ways that we process information. System 1 thinking is automatic. It happens very fast. We can have quick responses, quick reactions, and it's the way the brain takes shortcuts because it's created habits over time, and that's how we're able to operate and do so many things without even thinking. For example, has anyone ever lost their keys? Oh my gosh, I lose mine all the time. My poor husband, I go, where's my keys? Because his brain works a little bit different than mine. But we do things automatically. Maybe you drive past an exit, you're not thinking about it, right? Maybe you do other things. Maybe you ever heard the term push my buttons? Right? Your buttons get pushed, you have an automatic response. Your brain has trained itself that when this happens, this is your response. You aren't even really thinking about the response before it happens. System 1 thinking, little effort, a lot of your unconscious biases come into play. The other one is System 2 thinking that he came up with, which is much more thought out, much more cognitive. You're considering the decision you're about to make. You're thinking about all the facts related to that decision. You're taking more time. It's slower. We spend, according to him, and by the way, he's an economist. He's a Nobel Prize winner, so he's well known in industry. 10% of our time is in System 2. 10%. 90% of our time is in System 1. It means our brain is trying to be so efficient because it has so much information to process. We create all these patterns of thinking to help us get through our day. And, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, pointed out to us that, for her, it's one of the hardest things to get at, and these are people just like the rest of us that have unconscious bias, who's trying to interpret, in her case, a constitutional law and deciding, what is it that she needs to make a decision on. And and it's not just her, it's any one of us has this challenge. So today we're going to talk about these 8 different biases. We're going to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. We're going to talk about confirmation bias, sunk cost fallacy, planning fallacy, halo effect, priming effect, in-group bias, and framing effect. What I encourage you to do to think for yourself, when we talk about these, you can just do your own internal scale, right? One is never happened to me. I've never experienced this bias, or I can't recall this ever maybe impacting a decision I make. 5 is, yeah, sometimes I think I've actually experienced this without me even understanding it. 10 is, happens all the time, right? So, just think for yourself, how does this apply to yourself? And have you actually experienced it from outside of yourself, right? Experienced it through interactions with others. The Dunning-Kruger effect, when people overestimate or underestimate their own abilities. This is when people perhaps are the first to raise their hand to take on a new initiative. I want to do that. This is a piece of cake. I've got this covered, no problem. Are they ever overestimating their abilities because they don't really know enough information to understand what it's really going to take to undertake the task? Has anybody here ever had that happen to them in there? I see a lot of head nods, right? Yeah, for sure. So what's important about the Dunning-Kruger effect is that as leaders, we sit back and say, okay, am I thinking I know a lot, but I really don't? And here he is. I think this happens to many people on Sunday afternoons, right? We think we know more because why? It's football season. The armchair quarterback is sitting there calling the plays for the head coach of the New England Patriots, and they're like sitting there, like, why did Bill just call this play? It doesn't make any sense. And we know more than Bill because we're sitting there watching on TV and we knew the play that should be happening, right? It's that idea that we actually think we know more than we do, and that we know more than the experts in the field. And that's just a unconscious bias that many people have. I'm sure I've had it myself at times, but that's one of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yes, and it says, Ralph decided to take a break from his posting his expert opinions on medical science and foreign policy on social media to be the armchair quarterback. Yeah. Confirmation bias is a tendency for people to seek and retain information that reinforces the beliefs and ideas that they already have. So in confirmation bias, this is when we may say to ourselves, there's a process going on perhaps in your office, right? It's one that's been there for a while, and someone comes up to you and says, I think I have a great idea. I want to put this new thing in place, some new innovative idea, right? And then they say, oh, if your person you're talking to says, but let me tell you all the reasons why what we're doing right now is really good. And I have a lot of information that actually I can share with you that tells you why we're doing it this way. So what happens in that case if you have confirmation bias and you've collected all this information that supports your idea of why this is good? The other person then gets kind of tapped down. Don't come with innovative ideas, right? Because this person has a confirmation bias that they're only collecting information that supports their idea. And in fact, many of us do that. There's objective facts, there's the facts that confirm our beliefs, and then we land somewhere in the middle, mostly is that we actually experience. So the idea of confirmation bias is that even when we have opposing views, what we retain or more likely retain are those facts that support our own beliefs. So then we have to decide, how do we check ourselves? What can we do to make sure that we're really considering alternative beliefs or alternative ideas or concepts? And is there a way to do some sort of evaluation that allows us to make the best decision, not based on our beliefs and the information that we are perceiving, but also just holistically more information? The sunk cost fallacy is where individuals commit the sunk cost fallacy when they continue a behavior or endeavor due to previously invested resources, time, money, and effort. In this case, there can be a lot of times when we have either personal time, personal effort, our business money, things that happen, we put a lot into it. And we'll keep putting into it because we don't want to say that it can't happen, right? A lot of analogies are you're in a rowboat and the water's coming in, but you continue to stay in it because you think you're going to bail yourself out, right? You're not doing something to actually get yourself out. You have a sunk cost fallacy. So the important thing with a sunk cost fallacy is to really identify for yourself if you think you could be subject to sunk cost fallacy. What are the facts that are driving the decision that you're about to make? Are you personally invested in making something happen? Does anyone have an example? Because I can think of a few of a sunk cost fallacy. Oh, did everyone hear what she said? You want me to say it for you?
That is true.
So she said her first marriage, because she kept trying. I think this can happen in business a lot with systems, where people either with a new process that people have a great idea, let's put the process in place and try to make it work, and you keep investing more in the process, and it ends up not working, and it takes a while for people to really give up on it and say, oh, I thought this was going to work, or it didn't, and it didn't work out. Could be an IT system, and sometimes it happens with technology. We want to adopt it. But I'm going to play a little video for you and see it at work right here.
Hey.
Oh, nothing for me. I'm going to Atomic Sub later.
Atomic Sub? Why are you eating there?
I get a card, and they stamp it every time I buy a sub. 24 stamps, and I become a submarine captain.
What does that mean?
Free sub? Oh, I can't believe it. I've lost my Atomic Sub card. I've eaten 23 bad subs. I just need one more. It's like a long, bad movie, but you want to see the end of it?
No, you walk out.
All right, then it's like a boring book, but you gotta finish it.
No, you wait for the movie.
I want that free sub.
You're still trying to get that free sub?
Hey, I have spent a lot of time and I have eaten a lot of crap to get to where I am today. And I am not throwing it all away now.
Is there a captain's hat involved in this?
Maybe.
So, that's the sunk cost fallacy, and I think we can experience it in our jobs most time when we just I put so much time, so much effort into this, and I just am not going to give up. So that's the time you have to step back, hit that pause button, and say, okay, what's really going on? Is this my perception in my own effort that's holding me back, or is there another reason why I'm having this reaction right now? Anybody have any stories they want to share on sunk cost fallacy? Anybody else? Okay. Oops. And then we have the planning fallacy, and this is the tendency to underestimate the amount of time it will take to complete a task. This is as well as the cost and risk associated with that task, even if it contradicts your experiences. I call this it's associated with the optimistic bias, right? This is when we're planning things and it's planning like this is going to happen and we can actually get this done in a really short amount of time. Even if historically we look back and we know, oh, I've done the same thing before and maybe it took me 18 months. But now I think it's really going to take us 12. Regardless of what happens, what data I have to tell me differently, I have this belief that we're going to get this planning done. So what's a real world experience? I can talk about this. Yes?
We were changing the payment process on something. I just started with New Dimensions about a month and a half ago. And I was tasked with changing a payment process. And I'm like, oh, this is going to take a couple days to do. So 3 weeks later, we're still working on it. And I've heard my expectations that I have about 2 weeks left to get this done, or I'm going to get pulled into Ryan's office.
Good one. Yes, it happens to, this optimistic, bias we have during the planning process that can impact us. Anybody else have a story to share on this? Yeah, so I had a long career in capital investment for a major utility, which has office in Maine. And I had responsibility for four different electric operating companies in the Northeast. And so every year, I had to get my budget done, my capital investment budget committed to for the company, so they knew exactly what we would be building for infrastructure and getting into service. And I really liked working with my project managers. They were a great group of people across multiple states, really working hard. And I would tell them every time we had to give our capital budget projections, please be conservative, right? Because this number, we're going to put the number out. Numbers are another bias we're not going to talk about today, but I need a number to give in regards to how much we're going to get done. Be conservative. We know, this stuff, we have to go through processes, so put that into your budget. I want to make sure we're going to be able to hit this number. It's realistic. I give them the pep talk. It took me 2 years to figure out, get the number and cut it by 10%, right? Because their planning was everything's going to go great. We're going to be able to get a lot of work done. They were very optimistic in their projections, but their planning didn't recognize the own trends that we were completing. They didn't think about the costs and risks associated with what they're trying to get done, and they had the planning fallacy at play. So here's Dilbert. He says, our project plan will follow the usual arc. Phase 1 will be unwarranted optimism, supported by delusions of competence. Right? In phase 2, the obstructionists will slither out of their lairs and try to smother our dreams. And then ignorance and envy will fuel rumors that get repeated until they morph into common knowledge. And resources will be allocated based on misinformation and favoritism. We'll talk about favoritism and in-group bias later, and requirements will drift until the project is both undesirable and impossible. That brings us to the second week, right? I want my unwarranted optimism back. That's planning fallacy. The next one we have is the halo and horn effect. This is when people allow a personal perception of someone to influence their judgments. So this is when, especially this can happen during the interview process, if you're interviewing people and you're making a perception of how they present themselves. Perhaps their clothing can cause you to have a certain perception. Perhaps they have tattoos. Perhaps they have a t-shirt and jeans on, when they come to an interview. Perhaps, and I always talk to people about, if you walk into a meeting and you see someone that comes in with a business suit and they have glasses on and they're carrying an attaché case, and perhaps they're 6'1", and they look very confident, and you may have a perception or judgment on them, as opposed to someone comes into a meeting, same meeting, but they're wearing a black t-shirt and a pair of jeans and Nike sneakers. And you may have a different perception of the person's intelligence. How smart are they? What are they really, thinking of? Maybe they don't look like us and they look different, and it's causing you to have a different perception of that person. So this is the idea, especially with the halo effect, that we identify with people based on how they appear to us individually. And then I just, the fact of the matter is, you have somebody, whether you agree with his business or not, someone like Mark Zuckerberg, whose uniform is a t-shirt, jeans, and Nike sneakers, right? But if in a perception perspective, if you never knew who he was and you had to interview him, they may be upset if that's how they showed up at a job interview, right? So the horn effect and the halo effect. Let's watch a video and see how this works.
An American study found business graduates earn $600 a year more for every extra inch of height. And in US presidential elections, the taller man has won 17 out of 21 times. So, to test whether size really does matter, we took two actors to the streets of New York. Marcus and Melvin are almost identical. Same age, similar looks, just one obvious difference. Marcus is 6'4", and Melvin's 5'2". But who looks more successful at work? First, tall man Marcus.
He's a lawyer, doctor, and then accountant.
I would say he's an executive who likes sports.
Probably earns about $500,000 a year. 54, 58, maybe close to 60 a year, 60,000.
I would say maybe 100,000 a year.
He looks like a tycoon.
Now short man Melvin.
He's little. Maybe a cook. It's like a cook.
I think he's a quiet guy, and he's not very happy. I think he's having a difficult situation right now.
I'd say he earns about an average income, nothing fancy, but enough to live on, yeah.
Minimum wage, I guess, 20,000 a year.
On average, they credited Melvin with a meager $20,000 income and Marcus with a whopping $220,000. All thanks to a difference of 14 inches.
I wish I was his size, tell you the truth.
So our perceptions matter, and so we have to be, aware of this unconscious bias that we have. That we, here is a real-world example where they went on the street and they asked people just based on pure height, how are they, assessing their worth. And it happens to us all in business, whether we realize it or not. And I think that's really important for me to say. This is a judgment that happens naturally in our brain. This isn't something that, what's wrong with me thing. This is like your brain is making a judgment. It's trying to quickly ascertain a person that's in front of you and make a connection neurologically, and you produce a judgment, and it's totally the way your brain works. It's being aware of it, which is why I'm here today, is be aware of that's the way that your brain operates, and then it can, if you have an awareness, you can sit back and ask yourself, do I have a bias here that's impacting how I'm seeing this person? This can come into play, especially if you think about like how you give raises, who you prefer to perhaps promote. I mean, their appearance, is it influencing your perception of the people that are around you? The priming effect is a thought is primed when your brain recognizes words or images and makes it easier and quicker to pay attention to something. So we're often primed in ways that we don't even understand in business for things that happen around us. In one of the examples I came across where I thought was really interesting, because this is a very, very subtle priming effect, is if you wanted to go buy a bottle of wine and you walk into a wine shop, I don't know if there's anybody here that sells wine, but and you have an overstock of French wine, play some French music, and you get in there, someone's like, oh, French music, French wine. I mean, there's a priming effect of the environment that you're in that can influence the decisions you're going to be making. The other one here they talk about is if you're primed with food and you're thinking about food and someone asks you to put the letter in, what is the missing letter? Here you see food, you put in U for soup. Same 3 letters, S-O-P, and you fill in the letter A if you're thinking about cleaning. Your mind is primed to be thinking in this way, and then you go ahead and you make an association, and then you maybe have a reaction to this, what your brain is being stimulated to start thinking about, right? So that's just one area to be aware of. We talk about in-group bias. So in-group bias, also known as in-group favoritism, is a tendency for people to give preferential treatment to others who belong in the same group that they do. So I like to think of in-group bias is that in-groups can be really, really, really big. So we have an in-group about the East Coast. I mean, I think we all like living on the East Coast, and we think the West Coast people perhaps are not in our in-group, right? They're over there on the West Coast, they have their own environment. And the West Coast people think, hey, we're the in-group, you guys over on the East Coast, woof, what's going on over there? You guys a whole different environment. You can see it globally in groups that are in NATO. That's the in-group. And people that aren't in NATO are on the out-group. Right? But then you can bring it down to smaller and smaller and smaller groups of people where we have people that are within our group and outside of our group. So who can think of an in-group that they maybe belong to? Political parties. In-group, out-group. Anybody else have an idea? Yeah.
Go right down to motorcycle group. People who ride Harley Davidsons versus
Yeah.
W's.
Right, yeah, exactly. People do Harley Davidsons versus those that, even the in-group of Harleys versus out-group of Honda. In-group, you have like different groups who are you in the in-group? Are you on the out-group? So especially related to our leadership skills, understanding, are we treating people like they're part of our in-group? Or are we treating people like they're a part of the out-group? It's natural tendency to have in-groups, to have people that you assimilate with, you have an affinity for. Maybe they look like you. Maybe they think like you. And maybe all are part of a specific group. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Yes, have I experienced as an executive in-group, now that I'm more aware, right? I wouldn't have known this in the past, right? But now, in hindsight's 2020. Yes, of course I was. I'm a woman in the male-dominated industry. That isn't good or bad, it just is, right? It's just the way our industry has evolved to where we are today. Many meetings even today, I'm the only woman in the meeting. Which is, I don't really think too much about it other than mentioning it here. But I did notice in hindsight that, I try to reach out and have more connections because I'm trying to make some headway into the in-group, right? I want to have more knowledge about what the in-group is talking about coming from being on the outside. And so one takeaway for everyone here is, are there in-groups in your organization? And if there are, what is needed to expand and then have a more inclusive environment that allows opportunities, maybe that are going to people within the in-group, to people that are in the out-group. Does this make sense to people? I see some nods. I see, yes, this makes sense. A really important concept. Yeah, and this cartoon says, hey, buddy, are you familiar with the term birds of a feather? And these terms come from somewhere, right? They have evolved over time, and there's a reason why these terms come into play. And the last one I think we have, it's framing bias. It's affect the way information is presenting, impacting how it is perceived. So we all get information thrown at us, stimulated to us, and it may impact our perception of information. And some people think of this as, is your glass half full or is your glass half empty? How are you perceiving the information that's being given to you? Are you 90% meeting your budget expectations 90% of the way? Or I missed my budget by 10%. What is the framing that's going on that maybe is being presented to you from other people? There's framing going on all the time. Has anyone actually, consciously, now we're talking about unconscious framing, but consciously had a framing, put forth a framing? I have. I know I have framed information, I've framed data. So this is a way to think about, is information the way it's presented to me being framed in some way that I need to understand if it's having an impact and how it's interpreted? Right here is event, 10% failure rate versus 90% success rate. It's another way to think about framing. So I hit you with all these things. We've talked about Daniel Kahneman. We talked about system 1 and 2 thinking, that we have these unconscious biases because it helps us be more efficient in the way that our brain processes information. We make about 34,000 decisions every single day. That's how hard our brain is working. And we have like 1 million billion neurons activating within our brain as it tries to make sense of the world around us. So unconscious bias, they're there. They are not something that's going to go away. But the idea for today is build awareness so that it can come into play as you make decisions, whether it's in your business, your community, or at home. You have more awareness of what's going on, and that you can take this information and consider for yourself, is there something else I should be considering? The number one thing is to hit the pause button, especially if you're making a big decision. right? Hit the pause button and come up with some sort of criteria. How am I making this decision? What is prompting me to come to a certain conclusion very quickly? And take some time, take a 5-minute break and say, let me contemplate this for a minute before I make a major decision. Could be a major capital investment in your company. Could be the determination whether or not you need to hire or terminate any employee. There's significant decisions that have to be considered and wondering how am I going to make it in a way that is more quantifiable and factual as opposed to having other beliefs impact the way you're perceiving the information you're looking at. Practice new ways of thinking. The idea here is that you can start trying to do new things. Practice new ways of making decisions. The more you practice it, the more natural it'll become, and the less you'll go to default networking of making quick system one thinking decisions. Practice makes perfect. We say that because neurons that wire together, fire together. Hebb's law. And the more you create that connection in your brain and you practice that connection, the stronger the connection will be, where it will begin to become habitual. Deliberately seek information you do not have. So go out to people that have information that maybe you're not tapping into and asking if they can provide you with information that you should be considering in your decisions. Provide equitable opportunities. So we talked about the in-group, right? Think about, am I being equitable in opportunities that I have, and am I looking outside of my go-to people into giving others an opportunity to grow and learn? Create decision and risk matrices. A lot of people now with hiring, one is you don't interview by yourself, right? Because your perception can be totally different than the other person that's interviewing. The second is, do you have a process for interviewing where you have criteria that you're evaluating that's more quantifiable as opposed to just based on a Q&A and your perception of a person. Risk matrix is also about when you're making a key decision. You know, the one tool that can happen is if you're trying to make a big business decision and you have a planning fallacy about how this is going to happen in 2 days, right? Think about it like, okay, if I'm 6 weeks from now and this isn't working out, why? Why would it not work out in 6 weeks? What would get in my way to check your planning? And did you really identify the risks? And then use relevant historical information in analysis. So do some data analytics. Look at trends, look at what's going on. But I would also say, consider, again, when you talk about planning fallacy, consider, if I know I made a 10% increase in sales last year, our default network may say you can do 10% this year. You know, look at the data. What's the environmental data? What's the economic data? Is that a realistic goal to set for my organization? Is there something going on with talent retention? Is there something going on with economic impacts outside of your control that may be impacting the goals that you're setting for your organization? This is really important as we start thinking about talent in Maine, finding the right people for the jobs we have. We need talent. Everybody in Maine needs talent right now, right? So we're like, okay, how do we make sure we're setting the right goals, setting the right expectations for our team, and we're taking all the information we can in to make the best decision that we can. And then use third-party reviewers, have checkers that don't have a stake in the game. Take a look at this, tell me what you think. And then lastly, let go of judgment. Let go of judgment as much as you can. Don't make it personal. Be curious. And I would just note on the judgment side, safety is number one in many of the jobs I've always held, right? Safety is number one. And a lot of times when we get into safety conversation, it's about judgment and blame, who did what, when, and where. And we try to say, don't go to the blame, go to the what happened. What happened, what are we learning, and what can we do different? And just a little plug there for safety and everything that we do. And this is how you start thinking about your thinking and having a leader's mindset. And now I have questions.
Is it working?
Yeah.
I found the video fascinating with a large man versus a small man. There's really no way to change nature on that, though, because you're going to deal with businesses who are looking for that type of person to represent their company because that's going to draw more business in. And what would you recommend? How do you see this? I mean, you did a great job with this presentation on bias, but how do you fix something like that when you have perception, human perception of somebody making more money because they're 14 inches taller than somebody who's 5'2"?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I have two answers. One is it starts with each of us, right? It starts with each of us, the decisions we're making for in our own areas. Is a decision I make as a business leader in my company, is it a decision other business leaders have to, gain awareness about and ask themselves, why am I doing this, And then to your point, I think on the flip side, if you turn the mirror of the people that are maybe being impacted by other people's biases, like what do they do if they see it? And I think for very confident people, right, one is they need to raise their hand and say, hey, is there something going on here that's giving you a perception that this person is more qualified than I am, just because they happen to look a different way than I do, right? I think the other, again, a third thing is educating people within our organizations that this comes into play in how they all make decisions, and how in trying to ensure that there are more equitable ways in the hiring process, that we are looking at all candidates, just not candidates that fit a particular, not a good word, so I won't use it, but just a particular look, appearance.
One more follow-up.
Yeah.
You put one more slide up there that showed birds of a feather. And I think it's important to know that this is actually hardwired into us. This is nature. It's no different with birds or it is with fish or human beings. We're all the same. And that's the hard part to get beyond, because we're dealing with the way we're hardwired. It's
Absolutely.
a protective mechanism.
Yes, this is just a natural human behavior. So way our brain was developed. It starts in the amygdala, where we have our emotions are set, and where our fight, flight, fear comes from in all humans. And we take in information and we're trying to protect ourselves, right? So if you think about it, well, of course, we want to be with this in-group, right, where we feel very safe. We feel like we're with others that are like us. We don't have to take any risks. We're accepted, right? So it's human nature, right? It's the awareness of how is maybe this impacting others that can be. I can think of several in-groups that I'm part of, but it makes me question, am I being more, do I need to be more inclusive and reach out to other people and bring them and engage with them? And that's why I talk about is about, well, what can I do personally, and then to change, some of my own behavior, or even just create an awareness for myself. Well, when am I demonstrating this? Yes.
But I think that there is also a sense of time in terms of both cultural and generational shifts of mindset. So, the in-group may look different in a different country, a different continent, and an in-group may look different to the millennials than it does to the Gen Xers. So I do think that there is a component of time when it comes to mindset and these in-groups, if you would, or the biases between generations and cultures.
That's a really great point. Absolutely. There's going to be different in-groups depending on the generation in which you were brought up, right? Because every generation has different beliefs. They're exposed to different information. They're exposed to different cultural norms. And that all impacts like who ends up being in the in-group. I was part of the integration of several expatriates into my organization. I say several. There was probably 50. And there was definitely a lot of work to be done for cultural integration because we had two groups. We had the group that was from the United States, and we had the group that was from Spain. And my job was to create more inclusion across organizations because it's very natural for a lot of actually really good reasons for people, especially people coming from Spain who are trying to translate every single thing that we say in English into Spanish and then think about it and then respond back in English after they translate their thought from Spanish to English, right? So they like to talk to each other. Why? Because it's so much easier in their head, right? But it's that same idea. You have cultural differences even that drive this phenomenon. Others? Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. I would love to get some feedback on this presentation. And yes, thank you very much.
To that point, there are evaluation forms on your table in front of you. You can fill those out and either leave them face down where you sit, or you can put them over on the registration table as you depart. We're going to do some door prize drawings now, and thank you so much, Ellen. I have a little gift here for you that I'll give you when I get done with the door prize drawings. Thank you to everybody who contributed. First is a $10 gift certificate and travel mug donated by Aroma Joe's. See if Sabrina wins this again for the 100th time. Haha, not Sabrina. It is Jim Chapman from Kennebec Valley Community College. Congratulations. Next, we're giving away a $50 gift certificate to the Lion's Den, which was donated by FAME, the Finance Authority of Maine. And don't forget to go check out their table at the end. And that's going to Tanya Gross from the town of Winslow. Yay! We have a swag bag and travel mug donated by Coldwell Banker Plourd Real Estate. And that's going to Sabrina Jandro from Central Maine Growth Council. She makes money off these events, I swear. Okay, next we have a $10 Sella Tea Cafe gift card donated by Sella Tea Cafe. It's going to Jamie Plourd of Coldwell Banker Plourd Real Estate. We have a $50 valued gift basket with a sweatshirt, mug, and Pine Tree Society holiday Christmas gift cards donated by Pine Tree Society. And that is going to Tanya Verzoni from New Dimensions Federal Credit Union. Yay! These Christmas cards are really beautiful. Let's see. Swag bag with mug, Bluetooth speaker, and lantern donated by Maine State Credit Union is going to... Oh, he's not here. It was going to Dave, but he left. Must be present to win. Roger Kraus from Kennebec Water District. Ooh, and last but not least, we have a $30 gift certificate to the Heritage House Restaurant in Skowhegan, donated by the Heritage House. Lori Schmitz from New Dimensions Federal Credit Union. So again, I'd like to remind you to check out Pine Tree Camps, FAME, and sled treks on your way out. Lots of good swag there. If you want to be a business spotlighter, please let any one of us at the Chamber know, particularly Cindy. And this concludes this morning's breakfast forum. Thank you so much. We have the next year Business After Hours and Business Breakfast Series schedule on the table as you depart. Feel free to take one, hang it in your employee break room, and have happy holidays. Thank you.